Senator from Nebraska.
I would ask that the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today to discuss problems that affect almost every aspect of our everyday life, no matter who we are, where we live, our level of income, or any other distinction that might be possible to make. These problems have to do with America's surface transportation system. Like most Nebraskans, I believe that infrastructure is a core duty of the federal government. It represents investment in our economy, public safety, and national security. In the Senate, much of my work has been focused on removing unnecessary obstacles to the flow of goods, materials, and most importantly, people along our nation's surface transportation networks. Through legislation and with executive orders, we can lower the coefficient of friction on these systems. We can lower that enough that people and products can get where they need to go quicker and at a lower cost. I've been proud to support several pieces of legislation to do just that. In 2015, Congress passed the Fixing America's Surface Transportation, or the FAST Act. It was our first long-term highway bill in more than a decade. As chairman of the Surface Transportation Subcommittee in the Senate, I was glad to help steer it to final passage. I'm also proud to have authored a significant number of its provisions. For example, the bill includes a new national strategic freight program that provides every state with annual guaranteed funding. Because of the freight program, states will have greater flexibility to work with key stakeholders and local officials to develop strategic investments in transportation. The program funnels transportation funds to states and allows them to decide on their terms how to use it. By dedicating funding for rural and urban freight corridors, the program enhances the flow of commercial traffic, and it increases safety on our nation's roads. The true beauty of this program is that it offers states the opportunity to make critical investments to best meet their specific geographic and their specific infrastructure needs. Nebraska can elect to invest in a rail-grade crossing or a truck parking lot along a rural road. California could choose to invest in on-dock rail projects at our nation's largest port complex, located just outside of Los Angeles. It works for all states without leaving any behind. The FAST Act was an important first step, but there's more to be done. President Trump has spoken frequently about the need to invest in our transportation infrastructure. Just yesterday, the administration released a set of principles for re-examining how we do that. I'm encouraged to see these proposals that will give states greater flexibility to develop our infrastructure, as well as reduce unnecessary regulations that delay these very important projects. The proposal also talks about providing long-term solutions, something that I have long supported. This is critical for states to develop, construct, and maintain infrastructure. Last week, at a Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, we heard an update from Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao. She committed to working closely with Congress as we continue to develop common sense solutions for our infrastructure needs. She outlined some of the proposals the Department of Transportation is reviewing to include in this infrastructure package. During that hearing, Mr. President, you were there as well, the Secretary told me that she is committed to working closely with my colleagues and me to develop a national infrastructure policy. I also brought up the issue of delays due to burdensome regulations like the National Environmental Policy Act, that permitting process that directly affects Nebraska projects. To address these delays, the Nebraska unicameral unanimously passed legislation that would allow the Nebraska Department of Roads to assume the NEPA permitting process. NDOR has sent a letter to the Federal Highway Administration to begin that implementation of this program, and that could take up to 18 months to complete. I asked the Secretary for an update on the progress of the application, and she assured me that the department is following it closely. She said, "We know the issue, we are tracking it, and we will continue to pay attention." Furthermore, Secretary Chow explained that the administration will not specify any list of projects in an infrastructure plan. States know their transportation needs best, not the federal government. The larger role states have from start to finish in developing their own infrastructure, the more they can direct funding to the projects that directly affect their citizens. For the benefit of families across America, in both our urban and our rural areas, we need to look for out-of-the-box solutions to ensure that our infrastructure is up to date. That's why I've introduced the Build USA Infrastructure Act, which looks to solve two major challenges for our transportation system. The first is the near-term solvency of the Highway Trust Fund's expiration of the FAST Act in 2020. The second is a lack of flexibility for states in starting and finishing major transportation infrastructure projects. According to the March 2016 Congressional Budget Office projections, by the year 2026, the Highway Trust Fund will face a cumulative shortfall of approximately $107 billion. Meanwhile, we see construction costs climbing. The rise in the use of electric and alternative fueled vehicles is causing trust fund revenues to fall. Heavy federal regulations continue to eat away at that purchasing power of the Highway Trust Fund. America needs a new plan to successfully meet the looming Highway Trust Fund shortfall and to strengthen our transportation system. The Build USA Infrastructure Act gives us a plan. For 5 years following the expiration of the FAST Act, this legislation would direct the U.S. Treasury to dedicate approximately $21.4 billion in Customs and Border Patrol collected fees and revenues to the Highway Trust Fund. Now, CBP revenue collections on freight, cargo, and passengers include tariffs and duties, taxes, and user fees at U.S. land, water, and airports of entry. The CBP revenues from these sources amounts to nearly $46 billion in the fiscal year 2015. Because of their nature as charges on freight and travelers, customs duties and fees closely abide by the user pays principle that we look at in transportation funding. And according to CBP, the agency only utilizes $2 billion of that revenue for its operations. So the diversion of revenue would not negatively impact CBP's operating budget. By using an existing revenue stream, which has a transportation nexus, we provide stability to the Highway Trust Fund without increasing fees or taxes. And that, Mr. President, is sound policy. The Build USA Infrastructure Act also offers greater flexibility to states so that their limited highway dollars can go further for them. I served 8 years in the Nebraska legislature. I know our states, our counties, and cities face real challenges in starting and completing infrastructure projects because of excessive procedural costs, delays, and really that overall lack of transportation funding. According to the Congressional Research Service, major federal highway projects can take as long as 14 years to complete from start to finish. It took less time to build the Panama Canal, and we did that more than a century ago. Greater flexibility, improved collaboration, and more autonomy can help states begin and complete their vital infrastructure projects in less time, which means lower cost. The Build USA Infrastructure Act would let them do that through these state remittance agreements. This legislation would offer states more flexibility and control of infrastructure funding by establishing a new partnership between them and the U.S. Federal Highway Administration. Under this arrangement, states are permitted to enter into voluntary remittance agreements whereby they can remit 10% of their federal aid highway dollars in exchange for state purview over design, permitting, and construction aspects of federal aid highway projects. The state remitted money to the Federal Highway Administration would be deposited into the Highway Trust Fund to help further address its growing deficit. It would give states breathing room as they work to bring in projects on time and on budget. I am so confident in this bill because I've seen these concepts work at the state level. As a state senator in the Nebraska legislature, I introduced the Build Nebraska Act. It directed a quarter of each cent of sales tax revenue toward maintaining Nebraska's roads and bridges. Because of it, more than $1 billion will be available to meet Nebraska's infrastructure need over the next 17 years. I also introduced legislation that tasked the Nebraska Department of Roads with developing the Federal Funds Purchase Program. In exchange for giving up a portion of federal transportation dollars, Nebraska counties and their towns can now receive funds with more reasonable regulatory requirements. Because of this program, major Nebraska transportation projects like the long-standing bridge replacement in Buffalo County and a major arterial street in South Sioux City, they are up and running. Mr. President, investing in infrastructure means so much more than just adding a few lines to a map. It means connecting our families and delivering goods and services. In Nebraska's case, it means feeding the world. With persistence and prudent planning, we can build for the future. We can give greater economic opportunity to rising generations. We can connect communities, family to family, town to town, and coast to coast.